Okay, I'm live. All right, guys, so I am going to go over the review for tomorrow's test. Here we go. So number one, I'm going to factor x squared minus 3x minus 4 into x minus 4, x plus 1, because that multiplies to make negative 4 and adds to make negative 3. Number two, I'm going to common factor out of 12x. So if I common factor out of 12x, I'd have an x minus 3. Number three, I need the multiples of negative 12, negative 6, and positive 2. They will also add up to a negative 4. Number four, with the 3x squared, I got to do 3x and x. Only way I can get 3x squared. Multiples of 5 are 5 and a 1. But if I do my double smiley, I'll get a negative 15, negative 1, which makes my negative 16. Again, I'm going through this kind of quickly, so if you want to pause the video anytime, go ahead. This one's going to be difference of squares, 2x, plus 9, minus 9. That's it. Oh, easy. Now 6, we got to start solving. It has an equal sign. So I brought over the x by subtracting it. I brought over the 6 by subtracting it. Then I need to factor, okay? So I need multiples of negative 6, negative 3, negative 2. But then it says equals 0. I set up my mini equations. X minus 3 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0. And I solve. I get 3 and negative 2. Okay, 7. Got to bring everything over. So I brought over the negative 3x by subtracting it. I brought over the 12 by adding it. I combine these two to make a negative 12x. And then what times what makes 12? Well, that's easy, 6 and 2, but I need a negative 6 and negative 2. But those aren't the answers. I've got my mini equations, x minus 6 equals 0, boom. And I've got an x minus 2 equals 0, boom. So I solve and I get x equals positive 6 plus 6 plus 6. And x equals positive 2, boom, okay? 8. 8's pretty easy. I'm just going to divide by 4, divide by 4. What I recognize is those have nice square roots. So I take the square root of both of those, and I get 9 over 2. But remember, there's got to be two answers, so it's plus or minus. Okay? Thanks, Anna E. I'm recording. Okay, number 9. Well, I'm going to solve. So I'm going to go plus 1, and I get a 4. I got to get rid of the square, so I square root it, and I need two answers, plus minus 2. So I take my x minus 2 and set it equal to 2, and my x minus 2 set it equal to negative 2. I've got to solve. That's easy. Plus 2 plus 2, I get 4. Plus 2, I get 0, okay? 10, by completing the square. So I brought over the 11. Now, b is negative 10. I take half of that. Half of negative 10 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. So I add 25 to both sides. All right, well, that'll factor into x minus 5, which is x minus 5 quantity squared. Well, over here, when I balanced it, because I added 25 to both sides, I get 36. Okay, well, now what do I got to do with that? Well, x minus 5 quantity squared can be square rooted. Square root of 36 is 6, but remember, two answers, plus or minus 6. So I set it up as an x minus 5 equals 6, and x minus 5 equals negative 6. So I solve plus 5, and I get 11, plus 5, I get negative 1. Okay, number 11 is the quadratic formula. There it is, negative b plus minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, you probably need to take care of your own attendance too. So then I plugged in my b, which is 4, and my ac, and I end up with a negative 4, 16, 40, because I have to, then I add those, and I get 56. Square root of 56, about 7.48. I just did that on my calculator. Two equations because of the plus or minus. I had negative 4 plus 7.48 over 8 over 10, and negative 4 subtract 7.48 over 10. So I got about a 0.348 or 0.39 and a negative 1.15. Okay? All right, quadratic formula, which you can do. Okay, turn the page. Okay, now, all right, we got to graph this parabola. Let's see. First thing, the easy stuff. Y-intercept. There it is. 0, negative 3. I know that, so I put that point right there. And then what else do I know? Well, line of symmetry, I use my negative b over 2a. It's going to be negative 2 over 2 times 1, which is going to be negative 1. So I've got a line of symmetry at negative 1 right there. Now the vertex has to be somewhere along there, so I plug my negative 1 into the equation, negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 minus 3, and I wound up with a negative 4. So my vertex is along the line of symmetry. It's right there at negative 1, negative 4. Now I also need x-intercepts. So I set, because x-intercepts is where y is equal to 0. So I set equal to 0. Oh, this will factor. Yay me, because I like to factor. It's easy. So I factored multiples of 3. Negative 3 is a positive 3, negative 1. But of course, I've got to solve it. So I set it equal to 0. Got to solve it, set it equal to 0. So I solve it. Minus 3. I get one x-intercept at negative 3. I solve it, plus 1, plus 1. I get the other x-intercept at 1. Okay, we're doing great. Last problem. We throw a rock into the air. Gravity, initial velocity is 60 feet per second, and starting height is 30. Okay, so first of all, let's find the height, which would be the vertex. So I use my negative b over 2a, which is negative 60 over 2 times negative 16. I use my calculator, and I got about 1.875. That's a time in terms of seconds. Now to get the height, I just plug it in. Plug it in for t, and I used my calculator, and I got about 86.25. So I plugged it in, used my calculator, and it said the height was 86. Okay, so I got a point. I know my graph, first part of my point is here at 30. Started at 30, I know that. Starts at 30. I know then my height is at 1.75 and 86. Now when does it hit the ground? Well, that's the hard part. And that's going to take the quadratic formula. So I plugged it in. I used my quadratic formula, negative b plus minus b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, okay? And then I just simplified 60 squared. I multiplied that, 1,920. I added these two numbers. I got 5,520. And then I took the square root of that number, which is about 74.3. Okay, now I'm going to get this. So I've got two parts, negative 60 plus 74.3 over negative 2. And I got a negative 60 minus 74.3 over negative 32. Now I did both on my calculator. That can't be happening. That's a negative. That's time. You can't have a negative time, so you throw that out. So then the other answer is 4.2. So it goes up, whoop, hits the ground at 4.2 seconds. Okay. So now domain. Well, domain, the rock's in the air from 0 to 4.2 seconds. That's the domain. The range, the height is from 0 to 86.25. And that's all I have. We'll take this test tomorrow. Good luck, everybody. If you have any questions, come see me. All right, what do you guys think? Look pretty easy?